This morning, the White House is haunted by a single, undeniable image, one that no amount of spin, no rallies, and no flood of social media posts can undo. If you pull up the live security feeds from JFK International in New York, LAX in Los Angeles, or O'Hare in Chicago, what you see breaks every expectation of modern economics. It's a late January Friday, the kind of day when these terminals usually pulse with global energy tourists, business executives, cargo crews, all moving the wealth of nations in and out of the country. But today, the terminals are empty. At 6 a.m. Eastern, a grassroots movement that began as a meme on TikTok in Europe and surged across Asian markets, has finally arrived on American soil. What started as the "Make America Go Away" sentiment, once just a slogan, has become a weapon of economic destruction. They call it the Great American Boycott, and unlike government sanctions that take months to negotiate and years to take effect, this hits instantly. The speed is staggering. International travel bookings to the United States plummeted 90% in just 24 hours. European dock workers have refused to unload American ships in Rotterdam and Hamburg. In China, consumers are live streaming themselves tossing iPhones into trash cans in a viral display of nationalism. Apple and Tesla stocks plunged another 12% in pre-market trading. Inside the West Wing, President Trump is reportedly terrified. Already reeling from the ballroom scandal, the nurse shooting fallout, and the Japan bond crash, he now faces a threat he cannot control: the global perception of the brand. Sources reveal he understands one thing above all else: America's image is his power. And for the first time, that image has become toxic. He is screaming at trade advisors, demanding the European Union force citizens to buy American products, threatening to seize foreign assets. But capitalism doesn't work that way. You can force a treaty, but you cannot force a customer through the door. The mechanics of this crisis are unprecedented. Overnight, international goodwill built over 75 years evaporated in just 75 hours. It began in Denmark, triggered by Trump's threat to annex Greenland. The viral challenge, where Bye Bye USA, began trending in Copenhagen. Danish influencers, usually devoted to American culture, posted videos canceling Netflix subscriptions, swapping Coca-Cola for local sodas, and abandoning Florida vacations for trips to Spain. France followed. French cafes in Paris displayed handwritten signs: "No American products served here." Citizens returned Levi's jeans and Nike shoes, flooding TikTok with videos of cultural rejection under the hashtag number Sans-Marie without America. South Korea and Japan, US allies humiliated by Trump's protectionist comments, joined the movement. Samsung stores in Seoul launched overnight trade-in campaigns for iPhones, practically giving the devices away with slogans like "Switch to stability, switch to respect." Japanese youth, the trendsetters of Asia, posted videos burning American flags not from religious hatred, but from cultural disgust. The trigger wasn't just political, it was moral outrage. Sarah Jenkins' death video had been watched over 2 billion times globally. For much of the world, purchasing American products now felt like funding oppression. America's soft power, once our greatest export, worth more than oil or weapons, was dead. Wall Street called it a reputational black swan. Goldman Sachs downgraded the entire US consumer discretionary sector to sell, estimating $500 billion lost if the boycott lasted 1 month, with a potential 3-month stretch comparable to a depression worse than 1929. And the most dangerous part? Labor unions. The International Transport Workers Federation, representing 20 million workers worldwide, held an emergency vote in London. Solidarity with American nurses and Minneapolis victims resulted in deliberate slowdowns. In Rotterdam, Europe's largest port, dock workers inspected every American container thoroughly, turning operations that normally take minutes into multi-day processes. US soybeans, machinery, cars left to rot on Dutch docks. In Vancouver and Montreal, Canadian longshoremen joined the movement, refusing to load US-bound trains. The blockade now strangles America from multiple fronts. Walmart and Target warn of empty shelves next week. Rust Belt factories are shutting down, unable to import parts or export finished goods. Trump's threats on Truth Social banning ships or seizing cargo are empty. The unions hold the power, and they are squeezing the life out of his presidency. While the streets are boycotting, the boardrooms are conspiring. Leaks from the Financial Times reveal a secret video conference yesterday afternoon with the CEOs of the Global 50 Unilever, Nestlé, Toyota, Siemens, LVMH, HSBC, and major global banks. The topic was blunt and urgent: de-risking America. For decades, these companies treated the United States as a safe harbor, the place to park capital when the world went chaotic. Now, they see it as a conflict zone. According to the call transcript, the CEO of a major German automaker said, "We cannot rely on a market where the president threatens to seize assets, where the bond market is broken, and where the government shoots nurses. We must pivot to Asia and South America immediately. No press releases, no headlines, just a quiet, deliberate withdrawal, canceling new factories in Ohio, moving R&D centers to Toronto or London, reducing US warehouse inventory. This silent capital strike is suffocating the economy. It's not a crash, it's strangulation." Trump calls them globalist traders, but they answer to shareholders, and shareholders hate instability. By making America unstable, he made it uninvestable. The ultimate irony is that Trump built walls to keep the world out, and now the world has built walls to keep us in. Travel advisories that are usually reserved for war zones now target the United States. New Zealand raised its threat level for the US to high risk, alongside Turkey and Colombia, citing civil unrest, arbitrary detention, and potential state violence against foreign nationals. Germany warned citizens to avoid all protests, not to engage with federal law enforcement, and noted that medical care might be unavailable due to strikes, with gun violence and unpredictable police response. This is humiliating. Tourism, a $10 million job sector in Florida, Nevada, and New York, is collapsing. Hotels in Miami report 80% cancellations for February. Las Vegas casinos are empty, and Disney World is a ghost town. Trump's response has been frantic. The State Department issued counter-advisories claiming Europe is dangerous, but the global public ignores him. They have seen the video of the nurse, the tear gas in the church. They know where the danger is. The terrifying reality is that Donald Trump realizes he has gone too far. His fatal insult tweet didn't bring submission, it made people leave. Facing a looming economic depression, he is scrambling to fix it. Sources say he spent the morning attempting to call Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer, offering to drop Greenland demands, rescind tariffs, and retract statements. He wants ambassadors back, but they are refusing to answer. The Élysée Palace stated the president is unavailable, traveling. Downing Street made it clear the Prime Minister stands by the joint statement, and nothing will change until the rhetoric does. They are ghosting the President of the United States. They can smell the desperation and fear. They are waiting for him to break. For a man who craves attention like oxygen, this silence is suffocating. The boycott has now penetrated the one sector Trump depends on to prop up the stock market: big tech. The European Union's threat to use the anti-coercion instrument, ACI, has thrown Silicon Valley into panic. If Europe blocks US data transfers, giants like Facebook, Google, and Microsoft lose 30% of revenue overnight. Tech CEOs Musk, Zuckerberg, and Cook convened an emergency meeting at the White House, not to support Trump, but to deliver an ultimatum: fix this or the market collapses. Elon Musk, linked to the failed Greenland deal, reportedly signaled defection by posting a cryptic meme, a sinking ship captioned "Abandon." If Musk abandons Trump, the tech right and crypto communities follow. The tech sector now holds the power to deplatform the entire administration, tweak algorithms, and hide posts. With the EU applying pressure, this power could be used. Back on Main Street, panic is spreading. Americans watching news of the dock worker blockade are rushing to stores. Panic buying has begun. Toilet paper, medicine, electronics, car parts, all disappearing as the just-in-time supply chain collapses. By Monday, shelves could be bare. And when citizens cannot buy essentials, their anger turns toward the president. The Make America Go Away protests intensify because now even apolitical consumers are enraged. They don't care about Greenland, they care about insulin stuck on a ship in Rotterdam. The boycott has forced the consequences of Trump's foreign policy directly into American homes. There is a final existential threat looming that overshadows everything else. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have convened in an emergency session discussing a coordinated move to abandon the US dollar. For years, This was theoretical, but now it is becoming a survival strategy. With the US economy paralyzed by boycotts, government instability, and collapsing rule of law, holding dollar-denominated assets feels increasingly risky. If China or Saudi Arabia decide to price oil in yuan or gold, the dollar could collapse, triggering hyperinflation. Savings could vanish, pensions evaporate, and America's superpower status could disappear overnight. Trump watches the dollar index, DXY, drop like a stone, fully aware that losing reserve currency status would leave the US unable to print its way out of debt, turning the country into a version of Argentina. Reports describe a president physically shrinking under pressure, obsessively pacing, barely eating, and constantly reviewing maps highlighting the global boycott's red zones. "Why do they hate me? I made them rich," he reportedly asks, the collision of reality and delusion spiraling into a psychological collapse. Staff are removing sharp objects and limiting his access to the nuclear football. The president's mental state is fragile. The realization that everyone doesn't love him, as he believes, makes behavior erratic and dangerous. Meanwhile, the first victims of the boycott are the 9 million Americans living abroad. They are refused service in restaurants across Paris and Tokyo, evicted by landlords who no longer want Americans, and are flooding embassies for help. But the diplomatic freeze renders assistance nearly impossible. Horror stories go viral. Americans reporting that US credit cards are being declined in Berlin or that local merchants are refusing service. Social media amplifies these narratives, fueling anger back home. The week's events have transformed what began as a trade dispute into a near-total quarantine of the United States. The Make America Go Away movement has succeeded. The country is isolated, financially strained, and politically exposed. The boycott illustrates that in 2026, ruling by fear alone is no longer viable. Global consumers eventually organize, bypassing governments entirely. Donald Trump, once able to dominate markets through influence and rhetoric, has been effectively fired by the world's consumers. Now all eyes turn to American voters to see if they will follow suit. Meanwhile, Monday looms, and with markets reopening at 9:30 a.m., the stakes are clear. The consequences of these coordinated actions will be immediately visible in the US economy. Legal remedies are limited. Normally, the WTO, the World Trade Organization, prevents countries from banning goods. But this is not a government ban. It is a grassroots consumer boycott. The WTO cannot force a French teenager to buy Nikes, nor a Dutch dock worker to work faster. This is asymmetric economic warfare, bypassing treaties and exploiting market freedoms to destroy the market itself. Trump's lawyers search for loopholes, but none exist. The zeitgeist cannot be sued. Marketing experts are calling this the Bud Light moment for the entire country. Once a brand becomes toxic, recovery can take decades. Made in USA, once synonymous with quality and freedom, now evokes chaos and violence. Foreign companies are actively removing US flags from packaging to avoid backlash, threatening American exports for a generation. Even if Trump leaves office tomorrow, the damage remains. Rebuilding America's soft power will take years, perhaps decades, and California and New York are already opening independent diplomatic channels to mitigate the damage. States are stepping in where the federal government cannot, highlighting the fragmentation of US foreign policy. The massive boycott is the invisible army that Trump cannot bomb and cannot arrest. It wields the power of the purse, and right now the purse is firmly closed. Americans and international consumers alike are sending a message the administration cannot ignore. The landscape has changed. States, corporations, and ordinary citizens are moving independently, creating a coordinated force no single government can control. Supply chains are disrupted, investments are being quietly withdrawn, and public sentiment is reshaping global trade in real time. Trump's usual tactics of intimidation and threats are proving ineffective. Empty threats against unions, warnings on Truth Social, and promises to seize cargoes fall flat because the levers of power he understands are no longer in his hands. The world has organized around principles he cannot override. The consequences are already being felt in everyday life. Panic buying has swept through the United States as Americans realize that critical goods, medicine, electronics, food, and even essential car parts are stuck abroad. The just-in-time supply chain that once kept shelves stocked is failing, leaving citizens frustrated and blaming the administration. Ordinary consumers, previously disengaged from global politics, are now active participants in the boycott simply because they cannot access essential products. Factories across the Rust Belt are shutting down, unable to receive European components or export finished goods to Asia. Trump's political base is witnessing firsthand the fallout of his policies, and even those who once supported him are questioning the administration's competency. Meanwhile, the tech sector, which once bolstered Trump's influence online, is turning against him. With the European Union poised to implement the Anti-Coercion Instrument, ACI, Silicon Valley giants face the threat of losing 30% of revenue overnight if data transfers are blocked. CEOs of Facebook, Google, and Microsoft have gathered at the White House not to show support, but to deliver a stark ultimatum: either resolve the crisis or watch the market collapse. Elon Musk, once an ally in key geopolitical maneuvers, has signaled dissent with a cryptic meme depicting a sinking ship captioned, "Abandon." If Musk steps away, the tech right and cryptocurrency communities are expected to follow, removing the digital safety net Trump relied on to mobilize his base. The power dynamic has shifted. The administration can no longer rely on social media amplification or online support. Algorithms and platforms now stand as independent forces, capable of influencing the political and economic landscape. At the same time, Washington is witnessing the human impact of the boycott on Americans abroad. Expats, numbering over 9 million, are being denied service in restaurants, evicted from rented apartments, and blocked from accessing essential financial services. U.S. embassies, paralyzed by the diplomatic freeze, are unable to assist. Stories of hardship circulate on social media, highlighting the personal toll of foreign backlash against U.S. policies. These narratives amplify domestic anger, fueling protests, and further undermining confidence in the administration. The consequences of Trump's foreign policy are now visible not only in the abstract of stock prices and trade statistics, but in the tangible struggles of ordinary citizens, reinforcing the perception that America has become isolated and vulnerable. As the boycott tightens, the stakes reach their ultimate peak. The BRICS nations are considering a coordinated strategy to abandon the US dollar, a move that could collapse global confidence in America's financial system. With the economy paralyzed, government institutions destabilized, and rule of law under strain, the dollar itself is at risk. Should China, Saudi Arabia, or other major players price commodities like oil and gold or alternative currencies, the consequences would be catastrophic. Hyperinflation, the erosion of savings, the evaporation of pensions, and the sudden loss of America's superpower status. The financial nuclear option is real, and Trump watches the dollar index, DXY, plummet, fully aware that the country's ability to borrow, spend, and print currency is tethered to global confidence. Inside the White House, the president is physically and mentally unraveling. He paces obsessively, skips meals, and repeatedly reviews maps marked with global red zones where the boycott is most severe. Why do they hate me? I made them rich, he asks, caught between delusion and reality. Staff have removed sharp objects and limited his access to the nuclear football. This is a narcissistic collapse. The collision of perceived admiration and tangible hatred has created erratic and dangerous behavior. On the ground, 9 million Americans abroad suffer firsthand. Evicted, refused service, and ignored by paralyzed embassies, their experiences are broadcast on social media, amplifying domestic anger and further isolating the administration. The boycott has transformed from a consumer movement into a full-scale economic embargo orchestrated by citizens, states, unions, and corporations. Walmart and Target warn of empty shelves. Rust Belt factories are shuttered, tech giants threaten to deplatform and withhold critical revenue streams. Even legal options are limited. This is not a government ban, and the WTO cannot compel a teenager to buy American shoes or a dock worker to unload cargo faster. The power of the purse has rendered traditional levers of political control ineffective. Trump has attempted threats, counter-advisories, and ultimatums, but the world has organized beyond his reach. The Make America Go Away movement has succeeded. America is isolated, vulnerable, and facing the reality that fear alone cannot maintain obedience or power. This week's events prove a harsh lesson. Soft power, goodwill, and reputation are irreplaceable, and once destroyed, they take generations to rebuild. Even if Trump leaves office tomorrow, the damage remains. States like California and New York are negotiating their own trade agreements to survive the boycott, fragmenting federal authority. The combination of consumer activism, corporate withdrawal, labor solidarity, and international coordination has created a crisis the administration cannot bomb, arrest, or legislate away. The boycott is a living, invisible force, an economic army with the power to redefine America's position in the world. The story isn't over, but the lesson is clear. The era of unilateral domination is ending, and global consumers hold the ultimate power.